Okay, this is the new drive shaft for the friction wheel. This is the clutch, friction wheel, drive shaft goes into this. This is called the clutch system. So the problem is, got a new one because I broke the old one. Long story short, why I broke it, but I'm not going to get into it anyways. So if I turn it by the friction wheel, it turns quite easily. Since I got a lot of leverage here to turn it. But it is stiff, but very easy to turn. Now, if I try to use the wheel, light, reposition that. So, if I try to use the wheel only, it takes a lot of initial resistance to get it to turn. So I think the problem is the shaft here is a hair too wide. And the problem with this is, I think I'm going to break the gear sprocket at the end of the shaft. So I'm going to remove it and measure with the caliper the difference between the old shaft and this new one and see if I can sand it down ever so lightly. Now if it turns, unless you guys think this is normal, it'll break itself in. Turns, but with some force. There's no way I can turn this by hand from the gear side. Does not want to break, and I'm afraid of breaking this sprocket off the shaft. So that's my dilemma. Gotta take it apart again. It's a pain in the ass to take apart. Gotta take this off, the friction wheel off first, makes it easier to come out. Undo the 3 bolts on each side of the square shaft or the hex shaft. And this whole assembly will come up once I get it off the main chain. So this is a older CRAFTSMAN / NOMA / Murray, about 1987 vintage snowblower. Okay, this is the clutch assembly taken out of the machine. Just to show you how the new shaft is very hard to spin. If I try to grab it here, well, it's hard to grab there. Just try to, it does not want to spin freely. And I'm thinking it's going to wear out the bushing that's in here. Or actually, too much tension eventually break this little gear right off the shaft. So to take this out, you take out the hex shaft. That comes off, and the large gear just comes off its own bracket. Unspool it. And this, very hard to come out. And I feel like it's binding on this end of the shaft. But as you can see, it does go in. This is no problem, but as I get closer to the end, right about here, stiffens up. So I'm thinking of just honing that down just a little bit on this end and maybe just checking to see if there's a burr. Okay, sanding down the shaft to get it slightly less in diameter. Take some of the material off. This is for my snowblower shaft, drive shaft. Now what I did was got a strip. Now I only had a square left because I was using them for a sand block. And if I had a longer piece, would have been easier, but none so. So I stripped a little skinny piece. Now what you do is you wrap it around. Get under the gear, wrap it around, And you're going to go back and forth. Now if this was longer, been faster and easier, but it's short, but just kept on going like this as long as there's some grit left on the paper. Now I did that, still didn't go into the bushing. This is the clutch mounted on the vise, and I realized that one of the bearings, bushings, this one, for some reason on the inside was where am I? There we go. Was hitting the butt end of this. It wasn't going through properly unless I turned it in. So I got my trusty, where the heck did I put it? Here it is. Got 120 grit on the Dremel. Got 120 grit in there. This was able just to fit in. I didn't turn it on yet, and I was trying to feel the beginning of the bushing, the high spot. I realized it was on this side, and this is where I was pushing it then. I just put it on medium speed. This is when I turned it on, when I got a good spot, and I just did it for maybe like 5 seconds, and I think I did it twice. And now gotta find the shaft. I just brought, here it is. So now the shaft, there's no grease on here. I wiped everything down. There's a little bit of spray oil, and now it goes in without hitting. Before it was hitting, and it's still hitting it slightly, but much better than before. This will wear itself in, but now there's no grease in here. It's just some oil. I can turn this by hand, where before I cannot turn this by hand. The more I turn it, it seems like it's spinning even easier. So hopefully this will wear in smoother, where it'll have any friction left. So looks like I fixed it. Put it back in the machine and see how it goes. Okay, I got the clutch assembly all back together again, all lubed up and greased inside. And as you can see, I can actually turn it by hand, where before I couldn't. So it looks like, I can't remember which it was, this side or this side, the inner part of the bearing where it starts, because it's goes up to about here to here, is the bushing. For some reason it was a little up, and it would just create too much friction by the time I get both sides, the whole shaft through. Now the new shaft is 15.48 millimeters in diameter. The old shaft was 15.47, sometimes 46. So that little bit of difference, I never had any issues. But with the new shaft I did, and you can see, I can actually spin it just by turning the small sprocket. So, problem averted. Go back into my rebuilding of the CRAFTSMAN snowblower, and one problem solved. Okay, she's all put back together. And as you can see now, when I turn the wheel, it'll spin easily. And as she wears in, it'll probably even get better. But now I can just do it with one finger, where before I couldn't. So that solved my problem of just sanding down the inside of the bushing ever so slightly. Take care.